Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're uncovering a hidden occupational injury, one that happens totally quietly. Well, usually while everyone's hyper-focused on fighting the flames. Think about it. When you picture the risks of firefighting, your mind goes straight to the obvious stuff, right? The fire, collapsing structures, nasty chemicals, high-speed traffic. But we're going to explore something that is rarely talked about. It's actually one of the most reliable ways the fire service has damaged its own people. Yup, we are talking about noise. There's this brilliant quote on screen: "Firefighting damaged hearing quietly while everyone was watching the flames." And it really hits the nail on the head. Firefighters naturally talk about the immediate dangers, but noise? None of these noisy moments ever feel like an actual injury at the time. A loud noise doesn't leave a visible scar, you know? It doesn't put you in the hospital that day. But the damage just accumulates. Call out by call out, drill night by drill night, across an entire career. Because it's so gradual, it completely disguises where it came from. Plus, let's be real, there's always been this just get on with it culture in the service that kind of sweeps this exact thing under the rug. So, if you're finding conversations in busy rooms hard to follow, or you're dealing with this constant ringing in your ears that just refuses to leave, it is absolutely crucial to ask yourself, is this truly just getting older, or is it a direct result of your service? Lots of folks just assume their hearing is naturally fading. They don't look at firefighting as a classic, noisy job the way they look at, say, heavy manufacturing or mining. But the reality, the acoustic environment of a fire service career is just as punishing. It is absolutely capable of causing permanent damage. Let's look at the timeline of a typical shift. It builds into this wild acoustic assault, layering sudden, intense sounds over hours of sustained machinery roar. Think about the progression here. You start with station alerters and turnout systems, designed specifically to be impossible to ignore, right? Rousing you from a dead sleep. Then, boom, you're in the appliance. Two-tone sirens and air horns screaming just feet from an open cab window. We're talking 120 decibels here. That is literally like standing next to a rock concert speaker. Once on scene, the noise shifts. It goes from sudden impulses to just relentless noise. A pump running at full pressure right beside its operator for hours. Positive pressure ventilation fans roaring at doorways. And at road traffic collisions, you've got hydraulic cutters and reciprocating saws biting into metal inches from the head of a firefighter, trying to stabilize a casualty. It's a massive, career-long dose of noise. Now let's talk about tinnitus. This frequently accompanies hearing loss, and honestly for many, it's the crueler condition of the two. It disrupts sleep, it wrecks concentration, it wears down your patience. But here's the crazy part. Retirement often unmasks the ringing. Why? Because the background noise of working life is finally gone. You might have actually had it for years, but the constant hum of the station and the job just covered it up. And here is a vital takeaway for you. Tinnitus is a compensable injury in its own right. Even if your baseline hearing thresholds test totally perfectly, a clean audiogram does not end a tinnitus claim. Not at all. So how does the damage actually happen? Well, there are two distinct patterns, and a lot of firefighters carry a mix of both. First, you have cumulative exposure. That's the slow, gradual erosion. Years of pumps, fans, generators, and cab noise just wearing down the delicate hair cells in your inner ear. And once they're gone, they're gone. They do not regenerate. But then you also have acoustic trauma. This is immediate, permanent damage from a sudden, intense spike in noise. Think of an air horn blast right beside an open window, or a distress signal unit activating right next to your ear. It's damage from a single incident that you can probably still vividly remember. Medically speaking, there is a very specific frequency that matters here: 4 kilohertz. Occupational noise damage characteristically creates a distinctive notch right at the 4 kilohertz mark on a hearing test. Why does that matter? Well, it serves as an audiological fingerprint. It literally separates occupational noise damage from natural aging. See, age-related hearing loss generally creates a smoother, more even slope on a chart. But if an expert looks at your audiogram and spots that sharp dip right around 4 kilohertz, that's the smoking gun. That is classic industrial noise damage. Okay, moving on to the employer's legal duty, the failure to protect against foreseeable harm. The dangers of excessive noise, they've been established knowledge since the 1960s. So how exactly did the fire service breach its duties? Well, for a long time, there was this genuine operational tension. Firefighters need to hear casualties and radio instructions. So instead of finding specialized ear defenders that actually allowed for communication, the service often just didn't issue hearing protection at all. They exposed crews to sirens, pumps, and tools without properly specified protection, entirely violating clear statutory frameworks like the 1989 and 2005 Noise at Work regulations. They failed to assess the noise, failed to reduce it at the source, and completely dropped the ball on health surveillance and consistent audiometric testing. Now, you might be thinking, well, hold on, I served in Strathclyde or Lothian and Borders back in the 80s. Don't worry, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service was created in 2013, and they act as the legal successor. That means they carry the full legal liability for any hazardous noise exposure that occurred under the old legacy regional brigades. The 2013 merger literally just changed the name on the letter of claim, not the responsibility. Let's bust a major kitchen table legal myth right now. You might have seen news stories about military personnel really struggling to claim for hearing loss, facing all sorts of hurdles. But firefighter claims? Completely different ballpark. Firefighters don't face Crown immunity. There is no pre-1987 cutoff date, meaning your entire career is claimable no matter how far back it goes. And, crucially, there's no discount matrix reducing your award based on when you were discharged. Your claim is simply valued at its full worth under ordinary law. Period. It's also really vital to understand just how broad the category of who can claim actually is. It's not just whole-time firefighters, though they obviously have a classic exposure profile. Retained and on-call firefighters can claim on the exact same basis. Their pagers went off just as loudly, right? Their pumps ran just as hard. Whether you were an officer in charge, a driver, a pump operator, a breathing apparatus instructor, or workshop staff using tools all day, you have a recognized route to damage. Even control room operators dealing with headset exposure are completely eligible. Let's talk timing, because this timeline demystifies the strict 3-year limitation period in Scotland. This is probably the single most misunderstood point by former firefighters. The legal clock does not start on your last shift. It starts on your date of knowledge. For example, say you retired back in 1998, but your tinnitus started getting worse around 2015. Then, in 2025, a doctor finally explicitly links that damage to your time on the job. Boom. 2025 is when your clock starts. Never, ever declare yourself out of time based on a guess. Leave that to the specialists. So, what does the actual path forward look like? It's a seamless, no-win, no-fee process where specialists arrange all the evidence at absolutely no upfront cost to you. Step 1, a consultation to get your detailed service history. Then, lawyers recover your old employment and medical records. Step 3 is the big one, an expert audiological assessment and audiogram. Once the evidence is locked in, a formal letter of claim goes to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. And honestly, the vast majority of these are resolved through negotiation, long before anyone ever sees the inside of a courtroom. A successful claim really just rests on 2 main foundations. First, an accurate service history establishing your exposure. This builds the context, what stations you were at, the tools you used, if hearing protection was even enforced. Second, the medical evidence, which centers on a pure tone audiogram. And remember, you don't have to prove this all by yourself. Experts compare your service history and your audiogram thresholds against population norms to validate the occupational damage. They look for that 4 kilohertz notch we talked about and mathematically separate out the noise damage from standard aging. It is a very precise, highly scientific process. Now, let's break down the actual value of these claims using the Judicial College guidelines. For mild hearing loss, you're looking at around £7,000. But look at how severely tinnitus impacts these brackets. Severe tinnitus, all by itself, is generally estimated between £15,000 and £28,000. Add total deafness and severe tinnitus together, you are looking at $80,000 or more. And get this, that is before special damages are even added. Stuff like the massive out-of-pocket costs for top-tier private hearing aids or specialized therapy. Your hearing damage was not just some inevitable price of answering the bells. It was a completely foreseeable, highly preventable consequence of inadequate protection against a well-known hazard. You gave a career to your community. You should not have to spend your retirement sitting in a silent room just to escape the ringing in your ears. So the only question left to ask yourself today is this: are you going to accept this as just getting old, or are you ready to seek the justified recognition you are legally owed? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and we'll catch you in the next one.